order the Wausau Waterworks Commission for Tuesday, August 5th. The mayor is not here today, so I will be running the meeting. Item 1 on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the July 8th, 2025 meeting. I'd entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the minutes.
Motion. Have a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Item number 2, Director's Report on Utility Operations. Number of items, I can go through some of them. Scott and Ben can answer any questions on the lead service lines. It looks like tentatively we have scheduled for closing in September for 2025 funding, which is good because we will start seeing construction payments, which will be substantial for this year. The 2026 proposed funding, at least the estimates that we see, are in the packet and for you to take a look at. We are having community infrastructure partners come to the August 12th, next week's council meeting for a presentation, not only on a update of the 2025, but also what we're projecting for 2026 possible funding for the city council to consider through the budget process for loans and principal forgiveness. We definitely have been fortunate with the principal forgiveness that we're getting. In 26, it looks like about 12 million in principal forgiveness and 7 in loan. So, yeah, so those are some decisions that will be coming forward, which the commission will be involved in as well. So, any questions on that? Jim's not here today. He was asking about energy audits. As far as I know and what I've seen, I haven't seen any grants for doing energy audits. I will say Focus on Energy was involved in both of our water and wastewater treatment plants during construction with the types of equipment we put in for rebates that we receive from them, as well as helping us out, our design engineers, as well as about efficiencies to put into the facilities. So at this point, I haven't found anything that would actually give us an energy audit, but our facilities are new, so I do have confidence that they are running with the equipment that's as efficient as we can. As we move through operations with the new processes, I think there are probably some operational efficiencies that we could do that I think the operators will tie into over the next couple of years. Yeah.
So I know there was that pretty intense solar project thing to help offset some of the costs
Yeah.
of running the plant.
Yep.
And I know we sort of missed out on the ARPA funding for that, but do you know if there's any other funding opportunities since the neighborhood, it seems like they landed on a good compromise?
Yeah, so we proposed the solar project in the capital budget for 2026. The tax credits are still available, 30 to 50%, depending on what the city is eligible for at the time that the work is constructed. We don't know the future of those at this point in time, but for 25, they're in place. I think we'll know more probably at the end of the fiscal year for the feds, September, October, if those tax credits are going to carry through and for how long. What we proposed in the 26 budget for that was cost for design and engineering and bidding of that project for 2027 construction. We're anticipating probably a 12 to 16 week lag time once we order the panels. So if we bid late 26, early 27, 27 construction could happen then and have it up and running in 27. So I think in the CIP committee, they were pretty positive about budgeting for the engineering on that. So, yeah. Wastewater division, update on some projects. If you had any questions on those as well.
have a question.
Sure,
This is just
yeah.
probably, I mean, it's just a question. I'm wondering, okay, all right, better? Okay. Do you always contract for the bidding? Do you always go outside and have someone do all that work? Is that ever done internally? You know, like this lift station. I'm just wondering, why do we pay someone?
It depends on the complexity of the project, right? Like, we don't typically do lift stations in-house, and so we contract out the design of those, and we like the design engineer to cover the inspection as well as all the submittals, and they're very familiar as they write the specifications with help from our staff. A lot of the projects that we do in-house are all of our street projects, our water and sewer, distribution and collection system projects, but a lot of the specialty projects with facilities and pumps and hydraulics and things like that, we don't have staff that do that, so we contract
Okay,
that out.
so they always pretty much go outside?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And can I ask you, what are rock homes? Replacing all rock homes, well,
Yeah, those are locations where there's rock that we encounter that's shallow.
Actually?
Yeah,
Oh,
in the
okay.
ground that we have, that add cost to our project. So we either have to blast it or, use rock hammers and stuff to get through, or rock drilling to get through it, yeah.
okay, all right,
Okay,
thanks.
yeah.
That was it?
Other questions? We can move on to item 3, which is discussion and possible action approving contract amendment with Clark Dietz for the final design, bidding, and construction oversight of the Crocker Street Lift Station upgrade for 2026. And this kind of gets back to your question, Deb. Yeah. So they had designed several lift stations for us. This is the next one in line. They've brought these projects to 90% design. And as funding and as we budget for funding on the construction and relocation and rehab of them, then for the following year, then we'll work with Clark Dietz through the rest of that project to fruition. So that's what this is for. It's an amendment to their existing contract. I think it was 140,800, just for the record. Yeah, $140,800. And they have a breakdown. The final engineering would be $21,500. Bidding services are $5,400, and construction management and observation are $113,900. So I'd be looking for a motion on that.
I'll move to approve the Crocker Street Lift Station design completion by Clark Dietz contract.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do I have a second? Any further questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's approved. On to item number 4, discussion and update on recruiting, retention, and related staffing information. It's a continuation of last month's information. Through discussions with the HR director, we had put together some potential risks and results, to the utility not having adequate staffing, not being able to retain, as just some of the consequences and potential risks to the utility, and why it's important that we keep this at the forefront and find some options to make decisions to make improvements. I've also put in the information, some budget information. This is a few years old. This is from 2022. Both the budget impacts for addressing our current staff and then also the addition of staff moving into 2026. And each of the utilities has an enterprise fund, so I broke those out separately, one for the drinking water and one for the wastewater. These are estimated numbers at this point, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea of the impacts to the budget moving forward. It's about 1%, and then about 1.5% for adding staff. So I would like to bring some recommendations forward in September for the commission to take action on as it relates to these. And so, and something that would be effective immediately. And then we would budget accordingly for the 2026 budget. So if there's any additional information that you would like to see, these will be updated. I will be working with Lisa, the HR director, to have some more detail. Yeah, come on up, Lisa, if you want to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I do have just some information I wanted to pass along for you so you can understand kind of how my brain works when it comes to compensation and what my philosophy is. And I mean, the compensation part from a monetary perspective, of course, is very important, but I was looking at some of the numbers this morning, and when Eric and I speak about our formal recommendations that we bring forward to you, one of the things that I want to focus on is the employee experience and on the tacit knowledge that has, historically ran out the door when people leave. And I did write this down so that I can recite it verbatim, but tacit knowledge is, it refers to the kind of knowledge that is difficult to transfer to another person by means of writing or verbalizing. So looking at the overall tenure distribution of the utility, this is not in your packet because I just made it this morning, but it will be in the recommendation that we formally give to you. But we have all of our most tenured employees right up here at the end, approaching retirement age. That actual percentage will increase if we think of early retirement at 58. So we have a big group of people down here who are making up the bulk of our employees. And their tenure is, an average of 5 years when you're looking at the upper edge of the scale of 20 years. So as people leave, we're going to be losing that knowledge. And we've paid about $67,000 so far this year in the utility for overtime. It's about 1,600 hours. So if you extrapolate out to the end of the year, it's about $130,000 paid in overtime and 3,200 hours. Now, if you think of supplementing that with employees, it might be a little bit more for the overhead perspective for an employee. But the one thing you're getting with adding FTEs is that tacit knowledge that the people who are ready to retire and ready to pass the baton, they're going to be able to give it to a human being, to another person, and start building up that middle management piece of the utility that we're missing today. So my recommendation will be to support additional FTEs and increasing the compensation amount on from an hourly basis. What that number is, we don't know just yet, but I wanted you to kind of understand when we come to meet next month where my head is at and why. So if you have any questions, I'm here to provide data, whatever you might like. Send me an email, but we'll be working closely together to help solve this problem. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Can we get a copy of your operating budgets? The actual budget
Yeah.
that you do every year? I would
Yep.
like to see those. If I
Yep.
could get a copy of it.
Yep, I'll put that together with finance and get it sent out to the commission. Yeah. On the item number 5, discussion and possible action on setting PFAS target levels and GAC replacement. Granular activated carbon is GAC. I'm going to give a little background on this because this was quite a situation in the city, right, when PFAS came to light. And so because there are different rules in place between the EPA, the DNR, and DHS, right? So there's 3 different sets of values, which is part of the struggle as well. And Scott will go into more detail on this, but we had installed a process with granular activated carbon for PFAS removal. And so that will remove PFAS down to non-detect levels, right? in the system, but at a cost. And so if we, depending on what level of PFAS is tolerable in the water right at this point, will depend on the cost and how often we have to replace that granular activated carbon. So with that, the EPA, Scott, you might have to carry some of this. The EPA has a recommendation right now. They're established a recommendation of 4 parts per trillion. And I'll keep that in just general terms, right? But that is not effective or enforceable until 2030 or 31?
31.
31. The DNR has an enforcement standard of 70 parts per trillion. And the Department of Health Services with the state has a recommended level of 20 parts per trillion. So, as you can see, you know, depending on what you're looking at, these numbers have been bouncing around. And so we're bringing forward some history on this. We have Susan with Donahue here to provide a little presentation on that, but I wanted to give you a little background on this. And really what we're looking for from the commission is a consideration on what levels we should be looking at the change out of the granular activated carbon, which is about $1 million every time we change it. So, and that's been in place right now for 9 months.
A little over 9 months.
A little over 9 months, and we're starting to see some breakthrough on the carbon. So we will, over the next couple of months, probably, we're still non-detect levels because we have a lead bank and a lag bank, you know, but the lead bank is definitely bleeding out. And eventually here, probably this year, and I think Susan will go into some more details on this, but probably seeing some breakthrough into the distribution system, so. Do you have anything to add to that, Scott, before Susan gets started?
No, I think you covered it, and we can
Okay.
cover questions after Susan's
Yeah.
presentation. I think most of the questions should be answered.
Okay. So we prepared some slides just to explain, I mean, Eric gave a great background, but just to explain what the system is. I know, I think all of you are new since the system was, you know, we went through design and testing of and planning for the system. So I have some slides that just have some background on them. So let's see if I can pilot this correctly. You said the mouse, Gina? Like just left click it. Do you want to just, do you mind advancing? Can you advance them from there? No, no worries.
I only have one mouse.
Oh, do you want to just take it there and
No, because then you can't.
then I can't do it? Yeah.
Okay, so then it'll be just.
Oh, up
left
there.
click.
Got it.
So
Okay,
just
I was
left.
in the wrong spot, and I think I moved the mouse, so sorry. So this is just a brief overview of the presentation. I won't read through that. So just to give you background, there were a number of treatment alternatives that were evaluated. This is from one of the planning presentations, but we looked at not only granular activated carbon, ion exchange, and then a kind of an emerging Fluorosorb, which is another media that can go into the vessels. Ultimately, we selected the alternative one, which was 12 tall vessels for granular activated carbon. The reason for that was to give the city the most flexibility in the future, in that the tall vessels can not only use granular activated carbon, they can use ion exchange media, and they can also use some of these emerging adsorbents like Fluorosorb. And the one thing with the Fluorosorb is what we're being told right now is that costs are potentially less than granular activated carbon. It's just has not been used in Wisconsin yet. So the treatment system that is in place that was started up last November has the 12 tall vessels. This just shows a little more detail on it. The water comes in from the existing treatment train and the ion exchange system. The ion exchange system is there to remove the color in the water and then also the total organic carbon. And it was used on a temporary basis or an interim basis to remove PFAS. This just gives you an idea of what the vessels actually look like. They're really hard to take a big picture of because they're pretty big. But there are 12 vessels right now in the new treatment facility that was constructed adjacent to the existing drinking water plant building. Those treatment vessels operate in a lead lag configuration. So what that means is that from the ion exchange system, the water goes into each of one of the 6 pairs of vessels, and the lead vessel is what we call the working bed. And then a second vessel, the lag vessel. So the second vessel that it goes through, you can see the flow path there. So where the water comes in, it goes into, like, for example, vessel 1A. Through 1A, that's what we call the lead vessel, goes to vessel 1B, which is the lag vessel. We are monitoring throughout the vessel beds. Right now, our focus is primarily on that first lead vessel because that's where the removal is happening. Although some PFAS is still going into and will ultimately load the lag bed. So with this is just showing then what happens when we change things over. With the lead lag operation, once you remove the media or replace the media, from vessel 1A, for example, then the flow is basically reversed so that 1B becomes the lead vessel and 1A then is the lag vessel. So you're always just flip-flopping that operation. This depicts the sampling strategy that we're using, and you'll see some references in the presentation to where those sample ports are located. There are 4 sample ports for each vessel. The numbers depict the bed depth, so 25, 50, 75%, and then 100%, which is all the way through the bed of the carbon. And so the sampling has been going on for months now, and on a monthly basis, the samples are collected from a series of ports, depending on where we're seeing the PFAS levels advance through the vessel. This is just for reference to show you where we're at with influent concentrations. The water plant staff is always collecting influent samples, so before it goes through any treatment, you can see that only PFOA and PFOS are those that are exceeding what EPA is recommending as an MCL. I should have clarified that on that slide. So that MCL of 4, or maximum contaminant level of recommended maximum contaminant level of 4, is only being exceeded for those 2 compounds for the influent. And then I've also got the maximum contaminant level goals listed, so MCL and MCL goal. And these are the standards that we expect to be adopted. This slide is just showing just some observations on the different compounds that we're sampling for. There's 18 compounds that are sampled for at each location. What we're really seeing is the PFOA and PFOS that's coming through. And I was just curious, some of these samples some of these compounds have different number of carbons with them, and so generally the thought process is that the shorter carbon chain compounds will break through first. And so I was just kind of curious, and that's all the slide is depicting, is just we are seeing the PFOA and PFOS coming through the bed, but we're not seeing some other compounds come through the bed. So this is probably possibly the most interesting slide. Sorry that the graphs are kind of small, but I wanted to present them all on one slide so that you can see for each system, 1 through 6, how they're performing, because they are, for various reasons, like the performance is the same, it's just the amount of water that's going through them is varying somewhat. It just depends on the rotation of the vessels and how water is being delivered to them. But basically what this graph is showing is the various sample ports and then the level of PFOA, which is really the primary compound that we're seeing coming through the vessels. And then from this information, we're able to make some prediction of how that PFOA is moving through the vessels and make some prediction, even though right now our data is somewhat limited because the system has only been operating since last November, we can make some prediction of how long or how many bed volumes of water that we can treat. So as we would expect, this graph is showing the PFOA level for all the different systems, 1 through 6, at the 50 to 100% sample ports. So that's halfway through the lead vessel, and then 50% is halfway through the first vessel, the lead vessel, and 100% is halfway through the 2-vessel system, or the midpoint. And so you can see that, and then this is also comparing it to what the average influent levels are for PFOA, and then the health advisory level in Wisconsin is the 4, which also lines up with the EPA maximum contaminant level. So with this, we are seeing some breakthrough of PFAS or the compounds into the next bed. There is a pretty wide mass transfer zone relative to time to breakthrough. So, I mean, we're working with some time. And I don't really have a pointer here, but you can see on the left that diagram just shows what that mass transfer zone is, that blue area on each vessel, which is basically just how the compound is working through or making its way through the bed of carbon in the vessel. So with that, you can see what we would be predicting is we still have some media that, is not got any PFOA attached to it yet, and that's in the lag bed. But right now we are using up the lead vessels, or using up the carbon in the lead vessels, I should say. And so this next graph is really just trying to show what we're trying to track is how many bed volumes, or like how much water can we move through each vessel and still effectively remove the PFAS. But of course, the big question is, well, to what level are you removing it? Is it non-detect? Is it for, obviously 20, as you saw in the initial, the influent samples we don't have anything over 20, so that's not of concern. But that's a discussion we need to have. We're getting to the point of needing to think about replacing the media, and what is our goal here is really the question. I'll just give you, again, as Eric mentioned, the regulatory requirements. we've been all over the place with this. Back in 2022, 70 parts per trillion was a standard, it was established as a standard by DNR. We are expecting, based on the EPA maximum contaminant levels, the Wisconsin code to be revised to include the federal levels. And again, that would be PFOA at 4 and PFOS at 4, 3 other compounds, and then the hazard index, which is the sum of 4 different compounds. So this is what we're waiting to see go into place. I did talk with DNR. Right now, you would only be required to public notice at 20, if you're exceeded 20 parts per trillion, which is the health advisory level that was most recently adopted in Wisconsin for PFOA and PFOS. I did talk to DNR. They are expecting that to change, of course, but their big concern is not to get ahead of where EPA is with their rulemaking. And of course, we've recently heard that EPA is anticipating kind of backing off on their timeline, which was discussed. So just some other information. When we do any kind of drinking water system improvements for a public water system, we do need to generally get approval from DNR. So this is all like very new with changing out media. So I did check with DNR to see if they have any voice or requirement. And they said, no, we don't have to approve the material change out. The material we have right now is a Calgon product. We could use a different product if we chose to. The big requirement is that, of course, it all has to be National Science NSF 60 certified, which is a standard that we go by with drinking water treatment systems. We can use reactivated granular activated carbon, which is where the carbon that you have in the vessels now would be removed from the vessels and then reactivated at a remote site and then brought back. So you basically like get your same carbon back. And I know one of the probably biggest concerns, I should say the alternative to reactivated carbon would just be to purchase new or virgin carbon. This is probably one of the biggest concerns that the commission, I would think, has is just the cost of this. We are looking at, some very significant costs. The column on the left, the short breakthrough, is just really the worst case. And then the best case. So we're somewhere around that, $1.3 to $1.8 million. And that's to replace all the vessels, all 12 vessels, all the carbon in them. With reactivated carbon, we would expect to see a 20 to 30% savings. So that's where the 1.44 million comes in, just a lesser cost for that reactivated product. So I feel like I've thrown a lot of information at you here. I'm happy to go back to any slides. I think I can go back, hopefully, and answer questions or delve into something more deeply.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I think one of the things, that we look at, because this is such a significant cost to the ratepayers, right? Like, to have the commission involved in determining, like, do we as staff, we monitor this as we go through, and then once we see 4 parts per million or parts per trillion breakthrough, that's when we schedule, the carbon replacement? Do we do it before the 4? Do we, when we were going through this, obviously there was a significant, public input, right? Like, people were nervous, there was anxiety in the public about this, and I think a lot of it had to do with just the uncertainty of where these levels were going to fall, right? Like, where are regulatory agencies going to require us to be, which was very challenging trying to determine what type of process we were going to design and install, right? So I think with all that and the discussions that we had, we did follow the right process, and what we installed is correct. I don't disagree with that. It's just our operating costs, if we start replacing this more than once a year, become very significant. Can we get a year? And we will know more after 2 or 3 years of
Right.
this being in place, right? And then are we going to use reactivated carbon and try that for a year? Are we going to, try a different product from a different vendor rather than Calgon to see
Right.
if that carbon works better with our water quality? And so, and because this is so new, we are a little bit on kind of leading this effort on the change outs and things like that. So I will preface this as well, is that, a decision doesn't have to be made today. It's on the agenda for action. We could revisit this next month, but by next month, we will need a decision on this, so that we know, and from our operations, what we need to plan for. Maybe if you ran through a little bit of what you think the timeline would be to get 6 vessels changed out. So if we start seeing breakthrough within the distribution system, I think like what we would anticipate on a average basis of what it would take to replace.
Yeah, our preference with the way the plant operates and current staffing levels would probably be like 1 vessel a month. That would give us some security for getting safe samples and stuff. That's where we ran into issues with the initial startup, is we had one vessel that did come back unsafe, and then there's quite an extensive process with a chloride soak to handle that, or a basic caustic soak to, I guess, sanitize that vessel and then put it into service. So that would give us some time, some leeway, cushion as far as getting the process through, get it scheduled, and be able to handle it efficiently. So if we're looking at 6 months, we're probably looking at being at 4 parts in the next 3 to 4 months, I believe.
Yeah, for a couple of the vessels, like the 5 and 6 seem to be the mass transfer zone is moving through them most quickly, or they've gotten the most loading. So, yeah, we're looking at like 2 to 3 months, and that's for the second vessel.
So operationally, we've been trying to split these vessels into like three groups. So we have 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 5 and 6. And we're in the volume of water we're putting through them, we're varying so we can separate that travel through with the PFOA is our main concern right now. That's the contaminant of interest. So different volumes of water, splitting them up so we can keep a steady changeover, or at least a steady numbers as we're changing those over. So at 6 months, if we start in 2 or 3 months, I think we should be looking at it now as far as how we want to bid this out. Have a clause in there to where we can notify the supplier that we would need our first change out in 3 to 4 weeks after notification. We can work on those bid documents, try to get the best numbers from a supplier, and then move forward from there when we hit that 4 parts on either 5 or 6, and then start that process. If that's what the commission wants to do, if they want to do more or less. Our thoughts, or I guess a recommendation from us, would probably be to go to that 4 parts and do that, because at some point we're going to be regulated at 4 parts. So that's going to be probably the best information we can get as to how long it takes us to get there. If we start changing it out before or going non-detect, we're going to probably have to stay at that, because we won't know that time span when we are regulated at that number. And if we do go over, if we want to start looking at staying under 20, that is the only commitment that we did make going into it with this facility, is staying under the 20. But if we load our carbon up, both lead and lag, going into 20 parts per trillion, we're going to have to replace both of those at some point to get down to that 4 parts again. So it might, a little savings now might cost us more in the future.
Right. Yeah, you could conceivably get to a point where your lead, or your lag bed is fully loaded with carbon if you let it go, or with PFAS, if you let it go too long, and then you would be up for replacing both both vessels in the pair at the same time because you've lost the treatment capacity from it. So yeah, like to Scott's point, you're not necessarily saving anything right now by waiting because you're going to have to replace it eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What standard you're using here? The 4 parts, the 70 parts, the 20 parts? Who decides that? I mean, it seems like we had a problem. No, we didn't have a problem. And then now we have a problem depending on who you decide. So then you built this facility, and now we have the problem. And now we have $1 million problem. And is that going right to the rate user? That going to me?
Yeah, so
Jeez.
this is all in our operating budget, you know? So, and we do have a grant from the EPA for our first changeout, you know? So, and then I think.
For all of it?
For the first changeout, yes,
Okay.
for all of it. And then we'll have some for the second. We have about, what, 1.7 million?
Yeah.
Yeah, total. And so considering about $1 million for the changeout, then, you know, the first one's covered and a portion of the second one would be covered, yeah.
So depending on which EPA, DNR state, whoever uses it. And initially, they said we didn't have a problem with our water. I mean, that was the conversation here in Wausau, correct? That we were well under all this PFAS business. Is
Right.
that correct, right?
Yeah, we were
That
under
was
the
correct.
70, yes.
And then somewhere along the line, we decided we had that problem, right? How did that come about? I'm confused at how we ever got to this, and now we have all this debt and all of, you know, now $1 million a year to change out the carbon when we're still within, geez, I don't know, pick one. I think we're still within their criteria for clean water. So
Correct.
what are we doing here? I need some clarification.
And DHS at one point suggested to DNR that they should set their levels at 20 parts per trillion. DNR did not adopt that 20 parts per trillion. They adopted 70. But DNR was having municipal water systems send out letters and publicly notify that they were over the 20 parts per trillion if that's what your samples came back at. So, I mean, probably an opinion of mine, but they had an enforcement level of 70, but we're enforcing 20.
Okay.
And then EPA was
Decide
going to
that.
make,
You decide what you can do here with these 3 entities? I
That's
mean,
what-
I'm just
right
trying to
now-
figure out
right
who
now
makes
the-
that decision.
right now, that's what we're asking you.
Okay.
So I will tell you that, so the drinking water is regulated by 3 entities, right? EPA, DNR, and PSC, right? In the realm of our, of this situation, the DNR has stated that if you exceed 20 parts per trillion, you will have to provide public notice, right? So that's what, I mean, we want to avoid that, right? Because that usually creates anxiety in the public, right? But we know at some point in the future, we're likely going to be regulated at 4 parts per trillion, right? Because the EPA, what it looks like, although they've extended that, is likely to adopt that.
Yeah.
And then the DNR will then in turn, you know, have to adopt that. And so, so the idea here is, you know, do we utilize the 4 parts per trillion? So if we wait until we hit 4 parts per trillion in the distribution system, we don't have to notify anybody, but that would just be our internal trigger limit to say, now we need to schedule the replacement of the carbon, begin that process. If you never wanted to reach 4, then we'd have to replace sooner,
Right.
right? Which is more frequent replacements at a cost. But I also think in the interim, it is beneficial for us to gather that data over time on when we're actually reaching that 4 parts per trillion, right? Because if that's eventually what our MCL is going to be, our regulatory limit, that will greatly help us in the future determining how we replace these vessels, the carbon in these vessels. Yeah.
So every water utility
Yep.
had to do this.
Everyone,
Every little company, burb, municipality, everybody had to do this. Is that correct? Incur this huge expense.
Correct.
will have to, yeah.
We'll have to. And the rule was going to go in place for 4 parts per trillion in 2027. That's when compliance was going to be required. With the change in EPA, that they have decided to move that out to 2031.
Weren't we at below that here in Wausau? Weren't we below what they were? That the 4 parts per trillion in our drinking water, weren't we? We never were, we were.
We have 30 to 40 parts combined in our wells.
Yeah.
So our raw water is 30 to 40 parts. That's where we struggled with the 70 parts for the state, for the state code, and then the 20 parts for the DHS recommendation, because we were in between that. So we were under the state level, but we were over the notification level by DHS. And then when EPA came out with their recommendation for 4 parts per trillion, we were never going to meet that.
And these are all independent agencies. Nobody, EPA can't tell the DNR, can't tell the state. Everybody has their own opinion of what's clean. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So these are some of the challenges that we go back and forth with, right? Like if there's nothing established in place, right, that becomes the kind of that frustrating point, right? Like which numbers are we going to effectively use at this point in time? I mean, again, our recommendation would be wait to get as much extent life out of the activated carbon as we can to the 4 parts per trillion, because that's what we're going to be regulated at. And then begin our change out at that point.
And you didn't know how EPA is giving you money this year, but you don't know where that's going to go. That could go away too?
We were provided that money through a congressionally directed spending, the 1.7 million, so that's ours. That's not going away, but it's a one-time,
One time, one
fund.
time.
Yeah.
And then you'd look at rates again, when you
Yeah.
started
No,
incurring that.
we are building that in our current operating budget, the replacements, right? And
Okay.
that 1.6 million gives us the opportunity to do that, so that we do have that. I don't want to give you the impression that over the next 2 to 3 years, we aren't going to be looking at the rates again. I mean, that's just, everything's going up. So that's just the reality, right? Yeah, and that's both on the water
Sadly.
and wastewater, yeah. It's just a matter of how much that they go up. Hopefully, we're able to mitigate much of that, yeah.
And the fluorocarbon, or you had said something less expensive or same?
I
effect?
mentioned an alternative media right now. It's called Fluorosorb. At this point, that is not approved or has not been used in Wisconsin. My understanding, the last I heard, like in June, was that it does have some installations, like I think New Jersey probably, but I think that's something moving forward that, could be examined. Obviously, we have to, figure out what the cost savings could be, but, everything we've seen so far is indicating that it's less expensive. It's a product it's from a bentonite clay, so I believe it's mined in the U.S., which some of the carbon doesn't come from the U.S. It has to come from overseas. So, I mean, it just, it makes a difference in costs. That's where part of I think the reactivated cost savings is, you're not bringing in new carbon, you're reusing it.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, maybe moving forward, we have the infrastructure in place. You guys just need us to say, hey, start looking at it at 4,
Yeah.
et cetera. So can we put a pin in this and think about this vast amount of data that you gave us? It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I know.
I love the graph. The graph is amazing. I love it. And then just maybe talk about it next week or next month.
Yeah, we can put this back on.
Okay. Just to digest
Yeah.
and ask questions
And if you have
and
questions
think
in
about.
between now and then, we'd be happy to provide any information.
Sweet.
Yeah, if there are questions that come up, we'll be happy to field those. We will have probably additional data too, I think. And we can also refine some cost estimates if that would be, helpful. But yeah, if there are
Yep.
questions that come up for you.
And I guess my other question would be like the alternatives, like you were talking about, you'd have to do some testing, right? Is that something you guys have started to see, like the compound that you were
The
mentioning?
Fluorosorb?
Yeah, or any of the other ones that we could substitute into our vessels. Because I know, how long does the testing take?
So with the Fluorosorb, I think because it's a different media, I think we would probably have to pilot test that. With the other options I mentioned, with the carbon system right now, we could use a different brand of carbon. There are slightly different, like anything, right? Like slightly different formulations. We have talked about possibly, trying a couple of different vendors, like with the, loading the next vessels with a different brand. Maybe that works different. Maybe we get a better price. And I think a key piece of this too will be to bid out the carbon fill, which, is a process we can certainly start and undertake, just so that's going to help us get better numbers too.
And so wouldn't the different brand of carbon would still have the same outcomes, or they could be slightly different? And
They could be slightly different. We
But-
might get better pricing. It might operate a little differently, or, it might absorb to the particular water or the, particular compounds that Wausau has a little differently. Like, it's hard to know. That's like when we originally pilot tested, that's why we try, different things.
And so how long do pilot tests usually take?
Typically, like, it would be several months if we were going to do it pilot scale, but I think in this case, what we could do is purchase a different kind of media, or a different kind of carbon, like a different brand of carbon or slightly different formulation, and then try that full scale. Like, as long as it's approved, it's an NSF, National Sanitation Foundation approved product, then we can use it.
Okay, thanks.
But then you were talking about the Fluorosorb, right? Like, how long would we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would-
that would be a year.
Yeah,
probably.
probably, yeah.
So I mean, is that something that you can start now just to see how it does? And then like if it is really truly cost savings potentially, like it's cheaper
Yeah, I
of a
mean,
compound?
we could certainly look
Yeah.
at doing that, yeah. I mean, it's not approved for use yet, but then if it did get approved, then at least we would know, how that works with our water chemistry.
Because
and
it's such a
quality.
long lead for like testing, right?
Yeah. So maybe we'll have some discussions about where that is and,
Sure.
and potentially how long it might be before that potentially would be considered for an approval. Okay, we'll have that for you next month.
If I could say something quick, I appreciate it. If one thing we should keep in mind is that the wastewater treatment plant will be receiving their new discharge permit. We were supposed to have already received it, but it's been delayed, so we're waiting for that. Within that new permit term, the first 2 years we'll be doing PFAS testing on the effluent that we discharge to the Wisconsin River. So if we don't replace the GAC and go upwards of the 20 parts per trillion, that may impact our test results, throwing us into a minimization plan. So we have to keep that in mind too, where we want to be at with those numbers on the water side. That is conveyed to the wastewater treatment plant through the collection system. So.
Yeah. So, get it on both ends, so, yeah.
So I actually had a question.
Yeah.
This might be out of the realm of possibilities, but there is a lot of information here, and I do appreciate the extra time to look things over, pushing this off. Would there be a possible opportunity to tour the facility? I would love to see it. I mean,
Yeah,
this is all
anytime.
great, but to see it in person would be extremely helpful for me.
Yeah, we can work out a date. We'd probably have to notify for a possible quorum. So if we can work out a date and time, anytime you guys are available, that'd be great. Actually, I would appreciate that.
So we'll reach out to you, get a date that works for everybody and set that up. Great, yeah. All right. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a first and a second, all those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.